Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. And on behalf of the California Department of Education Special Education Division and the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, we'd like to welcome you to the 7th and final webinar in this incredible series focused on secondary transition and presented by members of the California Transition Alliance leadership team. Today's presentation will address secondary transition legal mandates. My name is Kevin Schaefer, Director of Program Support with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of El Dorado County. Also with us is Kristen Brooks, Executive Director of the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, and Program Support Specialist Dawn Berlin out of Riverside County. The SIP project provides support to LEAs across California to increase inclusive opportunities and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. For more information on the project, and to stay current on events throughout the state, you can visit our website at www.sipinclusion.org or join us on Facebook and Twitter at SIP Inclusion. A Padlet has also been developed for future access to recordings, resources, and registration. For access to this Padlet, simply click on the resource you're interested in and download as directed. The first column contains overarching resources, while each subsequent column contains resources specific to each webinar topic. To access the Padlet, which will continue to be updated, you simply need the web address and feel free to share it with colleagues. The Padlet will not be taken down or removed in the future. Next slide. Before we begin, we have one polling question we'd like you to answer. Please, how many of the previous webinars have you attended? Have you attended 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? Please enter your answer. We'll give it a few more seconds. All right, it looks about 34% have been here for all of the 6 previous webinars. That's exciting. We'd love to see that everyone's obtaining the amazing information and content that the presenters and the leadership team have put together. All right. We are grateful for this unique collaborative opportunity with Sue Sawyer and her team of experts. Please remember to take care of yourselves in these tumultuous times, as well as those you love. I'll hand it over to Sue, who will introduce her amazing team. Thank you all for being here with us, and we're so sad that this is our last webinar, but definitely look for more collaborative opportunities between SIP and the California Transition Alliance in the future. Take it away, Sue.
Thank you, Kevin. This is webinar 7, and what we're talking about today are the legal mandates for transition. We are going to look at the federal mandates as listed in IDEA, and then we're going to talk about the IEP requirements when you integrate transition in your IEP process. Our presenters today are Donna Waddell, who is the program specialist at SELPA with Madera County Superintendent of Schools, Richard Rosenberg, and Vicki Shad. Next slide. Before we begin, I would like to take a little bit of time to share what the California Transition Alliance is. It's a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 2005, and our mission is to provide support and resources to youth and youth-serving professionals who support youth as they transition from high school to adulthood. Our website address is the catransitionalliance.org. And we have lots of information on there, so we invite you to check out that website. Next slide. We accomplish our mission by creating tools and resources, by providing workshops, by hosting statewide institutes, collaboration with state and national partners, leading work groups. I lead the high school diploma work group, and Richard leads the Social Security work group. And we play a leadership role on the California Community of Practice on secondary transition. I would like to direct your attention to the book, Secondary Transition Planning, The Basics. And on the cover of that book, there's a meaning to it. First of all, it's a young child looking down a road. We think starting transition at age 16 is way too late. I think it's about, 14 years too late. And the other thing is that there are 3 words. As I've worked with a lot of different youth and provided career guidance and counseling, it occurred to me that there are 3 variables that every child needs in order to really set a goal for their future. And the first thing is hope, a sense of optimism about their future. Confidence, trust that they have the skills and abilities to do what they dream of doing. And trust in resources, trust that they have adult allies who support them, trust that they have financial aid if they need it, and transportation. And for too many of the youth, it means trust that they have food, clothing, and shelter. All of these ingredients are absolutely critical if a child is going to take the risk of setting a goal. If I don't have a sense of hope, if I don't think there's anything out there for me to do, why would I set a goal? If I don't have confidence in myself, if I don't believe I can do anything, why would I set a goal? Why would I take the risk of beginning to believe in myself? And if I don't have the resources that I need to accomplish my dream, then why would I even try? So all of those 3 things are essential traits that all kids need to develop. And it is the essence of helping that child prepare for life after high school. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about the legal mandates for transition as defined in IDEA. And Donna Waddell will explore how to develop and write the transition portion of the IEP. We encourage participation through the chat box, and hopefully we'll have some time for discussions. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And at the end, Sue, Richard, and Vicki will review lessons we have learned over the course of these webinars. And again, we encourage you to participate in the chat. Next slide. One of the things that we have available when we do workshops in person is a reflection tool. And we ask the people to think about their transition practices and rate what areas are they're solid in and what areas they need to improve. This document is in the Padlet today, and we hope you take the time to reflect on your transition practices and look at student engagement, look at post-secondary goal statements, look at assessments, the course of study, the annual goals, and make sure everything that you are supposed to do annually is done. And then we look at transition services, the course of study, and invitations to attend the IEP. Next slide. The federal government requires every state to submit a state performance plan. And the state submits the state performance plan indicators, and we took out those that relate to transition in the state of California. These are on page 10 of your basics book. So the first goal is to increase the graduation rate. Second, decrease the dropout rate. Third, increase participation of students with IEPs on statewide assessments. 8, increase parental involvement. 13, secondary transition in the IEP. And 14, post-school outcomes. The state performance plan is for all students and including students with disabilities. Next slide. So now we're going to take a look at secondary transition services as defined in the federal law and the federal guidelines based on IDEA. And in IDEA, it stipulates that the term transition services means a coordinated set of activities. That means those activities are intentional and they're connected. It's designed in a results-oriented process. And that means that the focus should be on the students' post-secondary goals, focused on improving academic and functional achievements. Academic relates to core academic classes and core academic standards. Functional achievement, ever wondered what that meant? It means everything that's not academic. So some of the workplace readiness, some of the soft skills, some of the daily living skills are all considered functional achievement goals. Next slide. IDEA goes on to say post-secondary activities should include post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and community participation. And it should be based on the child's needs, taking into account strengths, preferences, and interests. Next slide. It also includes instruction. It includes related services. And in this slide, we've got the list of all the related services as defined by the state of California. We have community experiences and the development of employment and other post-school adult living objectives. And if appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and vocational evaluation. Next slide. It also must include, to the extent appropriate, with the consent of parents or the child who has reached the age of majority, the public agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services. It stipulates transition services begin not later than the first IEP to be in effect when the child turns 16 or younger if determined by the IEP team and are updated annually. The IEP must include measurable post-secondary goals based on age-appropriate assessments related to training, education, employment, and where appropriate, independent living skills, and the transition services, including the course of study needed to help the child in reaching those goals. We keep hearing that word, when appropriate, independent living skills. And the reality is, next slide. The reality is all students need independent living skills. So we strongly encourage you when you write goals to include the independent living skills. They are essential. So when you construct an IEP, you're actually doing some backward mapping. You're starting with what the students' dreams are, what their interests are, what their hopes are, and hopefully you talk to the family about what their perceptions are and get the family involved in part of the assessment process. That assessment should culminate with post-secondary goals, and then coordinated sets of services, measurable annual goals, and the course of study are all consistent with helping that child accomplish those, prepare to accomplish those post-secondary goals. And the coordinated services, annual goals, and course of study are updated annually. And it also requires collaboration with other agencies and culminates in post-secondary outcomes. Next slide. So the state performance plan is indicator 13, and in order to achieve compliance with federal guidelines in the IEP, you have to have post-secondary goals updated annually, age-appropriate assessments, transition services, course of study, annual IEP goals, evidence that the student invitation is given an invitation to the meeting, and evidence representatives of agencies are invited to the meeting. And on the Padlet resource, there's the intact checklist for indicator 13. Next slide. This is a document that is included in your Padlet, and it summarizes all of the laws on one sheet. We frequently encourage people to take this document and laminate it and use it as a cheat sheet. Next slide. I'm pleased to introduce Donna Waddell, who will share how to write the transition section of the IEP. And we're thrilled that Donna is a member of the California Transition Alliance leadership team. Take it away, Donna.
Thank you, Sue. Okay. Oh, am I there? Okay. My name is Donna Waddell, and let me give you a little bit of information. I do work for the SELPA at Madera County Superintendent of Schools. I am very much interested in ed code and helping our school districts remain compliant in their IEPs and all of their planning. So before we really take a look at the slide that's up, I'd like to give you some information. This is about building the transition plan. There is no standalone transition IEP. The transition plan is part of the annual or the triennial IEP or conducted as another meeting that amends the annual or the triennial. The other thing I want to share with you is it is important to document, document, document. If you cannot produce the evidence to show that you did or did not do something and why, then it didn't happen. You must have the supporting evidence. So before we move on to really looking at the document itself, I want to suggest to you that you keep an organized digital or hard copy file. For example, how will a student be invited to the meeting? How will you document the invitation and response of a parent or an age of majority individual? How will you document evidence that you asked a parent about inviting agencies to a meeting? How will you document the response that a parent would not provide permission? So again, document, document, document. The slide you're looking at right now is the CalPADS transition indicators. Forgive me for it not looking very clear, but I thought it would be helpful for you to know what the CalPADS indicator code is and what that code is actually asking about. It certainly helps many of the people I work with to adequately address those post-secondary goals. These can be located on the CalPADS student page of SACE. If you don't use SACE, I'm sure you can find these somewhere in the special education information systems that you do use. Next slide, please. What I have provided here is a transition plan. This form came from the SELPA Forms Committee. And I'm going to jump around a little bit, but what I did is in red, you will see where I highlighted, each of the CalPADS codes that need to be addressed. These are the codes that when reports are run, CalPADS pulls the information from to determine whether you are compliant or you're not compliant. So let's walk through this. Did I invite the student to the meeting? Yes or no? You must invite the student to the meeting as Sue earlier expressed. And then, if appropriate and agreed upon, agencies that were invited. So yes, no, or NA. Something has to be there. And again, how are you going to document that these items were addressed? Now, describing how the student participated in the process. Were they present at the meeting? Were they interviewed prior? If a student cannot attend the meeting, they must be interviewed. Their dreams and desires must be presented at this meeting, not necessarily what the parent wants, but what the student can express that they want. And are age-appropriate transition assessments, were those used, yes or no? And then describe the results of the assessments. So here's what I look for. This is an expanding box if you're unaware of this. And this expanding box should be used to list the results of the assessments that were provided to the student, including information gained from an interview. I also suggest to teachers in our district that if this drop-down box is not big enough, create a report similar to a psychoeducational report and attach it to the IEP once it has been affirmed and attested. Now, let's look at the student's post-secondary goal or training for education. Upon completion of school, these are I will statements. And if I remember correctly, this student that I'm going to show you in a little bit said, I will go to school. And the CalPADS code that aligns with this is 1436 and 1437. And we'll see that a little bit more in the future. And then these are linked to the annual goals. Now we're going to show you the annual goals in a minute, but these are typically the academic type of goals that one would write that would help the student to meet the goal of going to college. And who's the person and agency responsible? That could be the student, the staff, who is responsible for helping make those goals come to fruition for the student. On the right side is the transition service code as appropriate. These are the 800 codes, and we're going to look at those in a moment. What I'd like to share with you right now is this is where all 800 codes should be. Recently, we ran a report on transition service codes and found that some students had a transition service code 415, which aligns with speech and language services. But speech and language services is not a transition service. So it's very, very important that everybody talk to each other, case managers, speech and language, and so forth, so that we make sure that students receive a transition plan that includes appropriate transition planning and the appropriate service codes. The activities to support the post-secondary goal, those are the things that what are you going to do to help that student attain the goal of going to school? And I'll show you a sample shortly. So this is for each post-secondary goal for education, employment, and independent living. Remember, present levels of performance, your assessment results, interviews, etc., including strengths and challenges, drive the development of goals, and goals drive services. Also remember, document, document, document. Next slide, please.
Donna, there's a question in the chat that's, I think other people might have a question about also. I always get questions about person, agency, responsible. Is it appropriate to indicate an agency that the student is known to be enrolled, such as regional center?
Absolutely. If you know that the student is receiving services by regional center or DOR, those individuals should be invited to the meeting because those are the individuals who would be providing service as the student transitions along. So yes, they should be included to the meeting. And to be honest, they like to be.
Could I add something to that?
Yes.
This is Sue. There are some reasons that you put not applicable to the agencies. That's if they, agencies that will pay or provide for services listed in the IEP are not available. Parent or student at age of majority refuses to consent, or it is too early to determine the student will need agency involvement. So it's real important you get that permission from the student or the parent about including that representative from Department of Rehabilitation or Regional Center to participate in the meetings. But it's certainly helpful to have them there.
And just one more question. For post-secondary goals, I sometimes have teachers that want to put 18 to 22-year-old programs as the post-secondary goal. Can you comment on this? And then we'll move on.
Maybe some clarification. I mean, they're actually just putting 18 to 22 and that's what it is.
Hi, this is Vicki. If you wouldn't mind, Donna, I'd like to add in. So the problem, people, is they get confused about the special education 18 to 21-year-old program. It is a K-12 program because the school district is collecting K-12 ADA. Now, if it's adult education, that's a separate and different thing. But the typical K-12 special ed program, 18 to 22, is part of the K-12 system, funded at the rate for the K-12 system, and is not an external agency partner.
Thank you, Vicki, and you're very, very correct. So for anybody who's not clear on that, an adult student who is enrolled in an ATP program is considered 12th grade.
Right.
Okay. And then what I wanted to address with Sue answering about other agencies, absolutely correct. I find that most of our students are already most of our mod severe students are already connected with an agency, but let me preface this again and remember that the ITP is for all students with an IEP, and it's mandated for students that at age prior to 16. So all students, thank you very much.
I think the other piece to that is there are some students who have inactive files with the regional center because while they're in school, there's no need for the regional center to provide services. If that's the case and the students will need those services, you have to work to activate that file and get the student link back in.
Yes, thank you. Okay, if I can move along. So I'm just showing you the areas where we have our CalPADS compliance codes, where the course of study is, and there's kind of a quick little sample of what a course of study is. This is a course of study that began at the junior year and the senior year. You can see that this student is diploma track, and then down at the bottom, you can see some other areas that I put some red arrows there that it's important that you make sure that those are marked yes or no, and double check those so that they don't fill as a no, but you should mean yes. Sometimes that happens. Make sure you double check your work there. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the 800 service codes. These are used on the transition plan on the right side of the plan, and they are described in the offer of FAPE on the service page. These are located in the state SELPA forms manual. I just wanted to show them to you so that you would be aware and then have them in the Padlet. Next slide, please. Okay, to create the transition plan, it's student-centered. You have to get the student involved in the process. You have to gather interest information, interview the student, use age-appropriate transition assessments. I recommend to use more than one assessment. Interview family members, teachers, people that know that student. And now what? Review all that data with the student. So you've taken all the information, you've taken the assessments, you've scored the assessments, all this information has come forward, and now review that information with the student and have a discussion with the student about what you learned about them, and listen to the student. What does the student think about all of this? What does the student think he or she would like to do in the future? If a student told me they wanted to be an astronaut, I wouldn't shoot that down. I'd tell them that's a great aspiration. And I would try to then figure out what skills the student needs in order to be an astronaut, if that's truly what they want to do. And the report writing, we talked about write a report that identifies the assessment used, the results, and the student desires. Don't be concerned if the student expresses a different desire than what is identified in the report. You're still mandated to use assessments and create a report and explain the results. And then if the student wants to do something that doesn't match, that's fine. It's all about what the student desires. So anyway, this report can be described or included in the describe the results of the assessment on page 1 of the ITP, or attach it as the report as an attachment to the IEP. Next slide. This is a sample of an assessment report that a teacher in our district completed. You can look and read that she described it as IDA requires that a student's preference be considered in planning post-high school goals. And she assessed the student using the picture career survey, interest survey, excuse me, and she explained that assessment. And then she explained the information that came from that survey. And the student was high in the area of artistic occupational interest area, liking to work with people, ideas, things, and prefer creative and self-expressive work. So the teacher did a really good job of explaining the assessment and then inputting that information into the plan itself. Transition goals are written accordingly, and the student will participate in community-based activities and job shadow to support her independence and improve her skills in the area. And after interviewing the student agreed that she was interested in the artistic occupational interest area, but does not care for the enterprising occupational interest area, and that she would like to work in a salon doing makeup, nails, or hair. Told a little bit more about the student and what she does. The important thing is to really get to know your students. The plan must be individualized. It must be built upon the student's strengths, their desires, and their dreams, as evidenced through the documentation. There should be no cookie cutter plans, which would also include cookie cutter goals and services. And if you're not sure what I mean, is I have seen plans where all it looks like is the name was changed. It must be individualized. Next slide, please. So this particular student that we saw the assessment results about, she participated in a person-centered IEP. And this is what she presented to those IEP team members. She said, I like to watch High School Musical, do makeup on people. I like to create my own dance moves. Next slide, please. What she's good at. So we're building upon her strengths and we're learning a lot about her. Next slide, please. She's telling us what her challenges are, what she needs help with. She needs help with counting change, and she wants help with getting a job. Next slide, please. And after high school, she would like to be famous and live in Madeira. Next slide, please. She'd also like to work with makeup or nail salon, drive a car, and live by herself. Next slide. So what does that mean for this student? So she says, upon completion of school, I will continue going to school. And it's linked to annual goals 1, 2, and 3, which we will see shortly. The person and agency responsible is the student and staff. And on the right side are the transition codes I spoke of earlier. They used transition code 830, which means vocational assessment, counseling, guidance, and career assessment. I included a comment that they could have used code 820, which was college awareness, as the student expressed that she wanted to continue to go to school. The activities to support the post-secondary goals, where she's going to continue to work on functional academic skills in language arts, in math, in writing, and vocational life skills, and community to become more independent. And the community experiences as appropriate. She's going to continue to participate in social events with friends and community events with family and friends. She's going to visit college campuses and/or vocational training programs, more than one, including the DSPS offices, either face-to-face or using digital sources. And then under related services as appropriate, it's the 330 specialized academic instruction. And next slide, please. So this is how we would address her goal for employment. She wants to work with makeup, nails, or hair. So we look down again to the bottom of the left side where it says link to annual goals 1, 2, 3, and 4, which you will see shortly. On the right side, you will see her transition service code, which is 840 for career awareness. These codes populate into the service page of the IEP, and we will see that also. Activities to support post-secondary goal would be to continue to explore careers in the artistic occupational interest area and makeup and/or nail salon and cosmetology. And she will practice taking the initiative to ask for help when needing assistance. And she'll learn to read and understand a pay stub. Because if we're going to be employed, we need to understand what that pay stub means. In addition, she'll have community-based instruction. She'll participate in outings to local businesses, including those of potential employment, and the related services as appropriate. Next slide. As this student had indicated that she wants to live by herself in Madeira, her goal is to live by herself. We'll look at the annual goals and how those link. And then we use transition service code 890 for other transition services. There could be so many activities that you could use to help the student with independent living. She's already said she needs to learn how to count money better, but she could learn budgeting, We could help her learn to read and make simple recipes. We could help her practice her self-advocacy skills and practice asking for assistance. She could research the cost of independent living. She could use public transportation. The activities are endless to help an individual be successful in living independently. Some community experiences would be research available housing in the community, participate in community events for recreation and leisure, such as sports, movies, dining, and shopping. Again, endless. And related services are Code 330, specialized academic instruction. Next slide, please. So here are the goals that I was speaking of. So these are the annual goals. And this student said she wants to go to school, she wants to be employed, and she wants to be independent. So her area of need is counting a mix of coins and paper money. And then her baseline is what she can do now. So the student is able to count the same value of coins by pennies, by nickels, by dimes and quarters up to 100. And when given a mix of coins totaling $5, student struggles to count the different values to calculate the total. How is that measured? Right now, she currently calculates the value with 60% accuracy in 10 trials. So her goal for next year is by when, given a real life scenario and a mix of coins and dollars up to $20, the student will be able to accurately calculate the value in 10 trials measured by teacher charted data. Now see, I didn't put a percentage in there because I said accurately. So she needs to do this accurately in 10 trials. This goal enables the student to be involved in the general ed curriculum. And next to that, you can see where the standard is listed. It's 5-point NBT. So it's a math standard. And then it also addresses her transition goal, her education and training, employment, and independent living. So I hope you see how that ties all together. Next slide, please. Another goal in an area of need that the student asks for help is self-advocacy, asking for help. So when unsure of what to do in the classroom or a job site, the student requires prompting to be reminded to ask for help. So for every 10 observed opportunities of needing help, the student currently asks for 4 opportunities without requiring prompting. Can you tell right now that what I am doing is I am establishing the baseline so that we can determine whether the student has made progress or not? You must establish a baseline and a goal that is measurable and observable. So her goal is by whatever date, when needing assistance, the student will take the initiative to ask for help from appropriate personnel, whether that's at school, on the job, going to a movie, what have you. 8 of 10 opportunities measured by teacher collected data. This enables the student to be involved in the progress in the general curriculum, and it's the College and Career Readiness Anchored Standard L6. Again, this goal works for her transition goal, supports her education and training, employment, and independent living. Next slide. Here we have a vocational goal. The student requires participation and practice in order to participate in a job interview. She's expressed interest in obtaining employment in some form of the cosmetology field. So the goal, number 3, is the student will participate in mock interviews, being able to appropriately introduce self, shake hands if that's appropriate at the time, maintain eye contact with the interviewer, and answer interview questions appropriately and clearly, and exhibit appropriate body language in 4 or 5 mock trials measured by teacher charted data. This enables students to be involved in the standard College and Career Readiness L6. And again, it addresses the transition goal, the education and training, the employment and independent living desire of the student. Next slide, please.
Donna, really
Yes.
quick, a question we get all the time that just showed up in the Q&A. We have been told that all goals have to be a grade level Common Core goal.
So with that, the answer is really yes. I instruct everybody to write a grade level goal, but then from that goal, you can map backwards and find the skill where the student is starting at and where you would like them to be in a year. But this is ultimately the goal that we are working towards. Great, they should be grade level, age appropriate goals. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
In this situation, the student needs to understand the pay stub. So the students express an interest in being employed and living independently. So the goal is student will read and provide a verbal explanation of health deductions, taxes, Social Security, the pay period, and pay per hour when provided with 3 samples of pay stubs. An understanding will be measured by a teacher-created rubric. And again, this enables the student to be involved in the College and Career Readiness Standard 11-12-4. So to go back and answer the question a little bit, if the student is a 10th grader or an 11th grader, I'm going to write a goal that is at that student's grade level because we are progressing towards that goal. And ultimately, that is where we want to end up. Hope that helps. Again, this addresses the transition goal, education and training, employment, and independent living. And if it doesn't address all 4 of those, then just check the areas that it does address. Next goal, or next slide, sorry. Okay, let's talk about special education and related services. So this is the 330 code. This is specialized academic instruction. The student is going to receive this 180 minutes served weekly in an individual or group setting in the regular classroom and public day school. What I strongly suggest to anybody writing an IEP is that in the comments, they are very, very clear to explain how and where these services are provided, what they look like, so that if this student goes someplace else, the receiving agency understands. I have received IEPs that just talk, under the comments, it just names a program, and that program doesn't tell me what the services are that the student is actually receiving. So as you can see, I wrote that the student will receive specialized academic instruction within the gen ed setting for 120 minutes per week and pulled out for 60 minutes per week. It's like you have a comment. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. A service is difficult to duplicate if it is unclear what the service provides. So that's why I made my earlier comment. Next slide. Service code, vocational assessment, counseling. It's service code 80, vocational assessment, counseling, guidance, and career assessment. So there's a start date and an end date. Don't get hung up on the dates I have there. They're all kind of made up. The provider is district of service. This is going to be in a group setting. It addresses secondary transition, and the student is going to receive 240 minutes monthly. Now, I want to share with you that our legal advisor had told us that if you just offer career awareness goals or a college type of a goal, and you just say 1 time per month, that is not being compliant. That is why you see I put in the duration and frequency of 240 minutes served monthly. And my comment said, for a total of 240 minutes each month for a period of 8 months, the student will participate in activities to include classroom research and visitations to agencies such as local colleges, cosmetology programs, and other post-secondary education options. You can clearly see what that student will be doing, so that helps us monitor that we are providing the service that we said we're going to provide, and if the student leaves in incoming agency, you can look at that and see if they can match that service. Next slide, please. This is Transition Service Code 840. It's career awareness. And then this one, we checked group and secondary transition, and I said for 60 minutes served monthly. So for a minimum of 60 minutes each month for a period of 8 months, the student will participate in classroom and offsite activities, visitations to explore careers in the artistic occupational interests, including those, including makeup, nail salon, and cosmetology. Next slide, please. Okay, other transition services. This is transition service code 890. For 120 minutes per month for a period of 10 months, the student will participate in activities that support living independently, such as researching the cost of living, visiting potential home sites, visiting the Social Security office and other supporting agencies. I would share with you that one of our students and families' biggest fears is for a student to become employed and how that will affect Social Security. I've strongly suggested that the teachers of our districts make an appointment with the Social Security office and have the students meet with somebody from that office to explain that and invite parents to come along. So think outside of the box and really think about what that student needs in order to be successful. Next slide, please. Notes. It would have been appropriate to develop additional annual goals to link to the post-secondary goals, specifically a budgeting or math goal, a cooking goal. And remember that the goal has to be able to be implemented. It's measurable and it's observable and understandable. And if any entity says that they cannot implement it, then it's not a good goal. If it's not understandable, it's not a good goal. Parents should be able to understand our language. So it needs to be understandable. And success towards a goal is measured by the accuracy of the data collected. The other thing I'd like to share is goals do not have to be met, but progress has to be able to be collected, measured towards the goal. Remember, the transition plan begins with what the students want for themselves. To want to be an astronaut is amazing, but do not crush the dream. Drill backwards to build upon emerging skills to help the student move towards the dream. And thank you for your participation. Next slide, please. So let's take time to reflect lessons learned. Remember, transition is not just a document. It's a process. It's a living document, as is the IEP. It requires creating a transition system within the school and the community. If we start transition planning at age 15, we are 14 years too late. Transition begins at day 1. We need to focus on the assets, not the deficits, in order to help the students develop confidence. Focus on their strengths. The diploma is a ticket to work and post-secondary education and training. Lacking a diploma creates significant barriers to having a career that pays a living wage. I'm going to add to this, challenge your students. Give them those opportunities. See what they can do. Remember that accommodations level the playing field and modifications change the playing field. Parents should be welcome, valued members of the IEP team. You will go a long way in listening to parents and answering their questions. They need to be prepared to help their child transition when transition begins the day they leave school. And some of the conversations are hard conversations to have with parents. How are they planning for the day that they are no longer around and their child must be independent? We also learned that there's a wealth of resources in the community and with agencies that provide post-school support. Take advantage of that plethora of information. And inclusion in general education, especially career tech ed, equips students with high academic standards. We need to raise the bar. We need to hold the students to a high level of achievement. So please share a lesson you learned in the chat. Please take a moment to do so. And next slide, please. I think this is Richard.
Donna, really quick before you leave, there's another question.
Sure.
For a student that is on an A through G track for diploma, how and when would you meet the hours and minutes for the transition service activities? Can time they do this after school count?
Thinking, so give me just a moment.
Mhm.
Ed code does not say when those minutes have to occur. So I would say yes, after school counts. If I am incorrect, I will do some research and let the group know. But I would also say that there may be some ways to collaborate with the A through G programs, with the teachers and so forth, to provide the student with the time during school so that school transportation and so forth can be utilized.
Donna, this is Vicki. Could I add just one thing to it?
Absolutely.
Okay, is if you look in our booklet, our last couple editions, but for sure in the current edition, we have a page that talks about multi levels of support, like a multi-tiered system similar to RTI or MTISS. So if you're involved in a school that's doing RTI or MTSS, it is definitely can be a tiered system. So what is happening on your school for all students in career planning or career exploration or any of those related areas, then how are the kids that you're working with or that you have in your caseload included in those things? And what are you or other special education staff or CTE staff or general ed staff or alternative ed staff doing to support the individual needs of the student with disabilities within that bigger structure? Hope maybe that's a little helpful.
Thank you, Vicki. I welcome the additional input. So thank you very much. I hope that my presentation was helpful.
Donna, that was great. I love your calm presenting style, the content, the charts, giving it to us. So thank you. We love it.
It was wonderful, Donna, and so accurate and really nice how you explained and showed people the connection from SACE to CalPADS, and because some people are struggling with that. Just really nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. So what we're trying to do at the end is try to pull 7 weeks, 7 seminars together. And Donna, you did a great job there. There were some questions in the question and answers and in the chat box that I would just like to jump off on to start with. The one question was, when do we start transition services? And that's one of my favorite. And I like to say we start in the OBGYN, the neonatal center, when the child is identified of having some issues and at risk. And at that point, we change our expectations. We help the family not be in doom and gloom. Then the next piece is, and we showed it on the first week, was that we really are looking at curriculum from preschool to adulthood. What are those activities in that preschool, in the elementary school, that can build on career, vocational, personal and social adjustment, personal space? That's all part of transition. So I love that question. The next one is mainstreaming. Do we just do mainstreaming to lead to career and voc? The answer is no. Those of us who have been blessed to be able to research and study mainstreaming and inclusion and be able to share with you a body of research, the research shows that with appropriate supports, inclusion, mainstreaming, let's just go inclusion, is the best way to go for young adults, children, infants. We have a body of research that ties to transition where we correlate those kids who have been in inclusive models with general ed, non-disabled peers will do better in their long outcomes of career, vocational, and the society at large. The other question that is always a burning question is, I have a student who's been conserved by his mother, grandmother, it doesn't matter who. And mother or grandmother or grandfather or father are the conservator. And they say, oh, little Richie wants to go to USC. No, little Richie wants to go to Rio Hondo, the community college. Little Richie's happy with that. The conservator says, no, he's going to go to a 4-year. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. How do we do the balance? And it really comes up in person-centered thinking. We listen to the student first. We don't put on the gloves with families, but we listen to the student. We hear the parents, but we then come back and say, we are here for your son or daughter who is expressing A, B, or C. We hear what your dream is or your desire, and we will listen to you, but your student, your child is the first one, which then gets to my last general comment before I go to the next slide. I've been in this world too long where people come up to me and say, Richard, how dare you let this person have a dream of being a doctor, being a rock star, being a sports star? My reality is, I know this kid doesn't read. I know this kid's math skills are at pre-primer, but I don't have to take away the dream. What I have to do is help direct this child to look at what are the realities. How can I get what I really want from my dream by being an LVN, by being a volunteer at the hospital or whatever that may be. So that's what I have to jump off on, seeing chat and questions in the box so far. Could you
Richard, this is Vicki. Hi, Richard. Hey, I answered with some ideas too of how to bring the parent along that are when the child's conserved, with a few samples of things that I've found to work. So they're in the chat.
Thank you, Vicki, and that's great. Can we go to the next slide when we were revisiting person-centered, person-driven planning? And I love the quote, "The road to success is not a path you find, but a trail you blaze." And I think what's important there is multifaceted. When I first came to California, there was a very nice stepping stone in the 80s. You went here, then you went here, then you went here, and you made it to the top. That hasn't worked for me personally and professionally. It hasn't worked for my kids. I don't think it's worked for anyone. So I love what Sue Sawyer came up with in our guide. It's more like a jungle gym. You walk to the right, you may fall down. You walk to the left, you may go up 2 bars, etc. But it is the trail that that person is blazing that's going to have an impact on the rest of their life. Why do we believe in person-centered, person-driven thinking? Because the focus is on the individual, allowing him or her to find life direction and pave their own path to the future. And that dovetails to a lot of what Donna said, in that please do not use an ITP as part of the IEP where all of your 10th graders are going to have a goal on making a budget, getting a plan to drive, and go to college. How can 3 goals across a whole district and all those 10th graders be individualized? We must go back to look at, what did little Richie say? Or what did Kevin say? Or what did Sue say when we did the informal assessment? We talked to the family. What makes them really happy? What do they have passion for, etc.? Why do we do this? Because we really want to promote empowerment and foster independence. And we also want to foster interdependence. I am lucky to say that over 120 people on this call, none of us are 100% independent. We count on the auto mechanic, we count on the tax guy, we count on our partners, we count on other people to make it happen. Why do we try to push our youth with disabilities? You need to be independent. You can be interdependent and be very successful. Increase opportunities for participation in the community. The real world is where it's all about. And that's what we want to bring to the classroom, to the community, and to that child. Recognize individual abilities, desires, and interests. But Richard, my student is so severely disabled. He doesn't communicate. I'm not sure he has 2 or 3 meaningful motions. He'll hit the big spot at certain times, or he'll do this at certain times. Fantastic. Then it's up to you to figure out how to communicate with 1 meaningful motion. It's up to you to look at the circle of support around that child. Talk to the instructional aides, talk to the bus aide, talk to the nurse, talk to other people who know that child. Where do they see him happy? Where do they see him thriving? Let's jump on that. And that's really important. Encourage self-awareness and responsibility. Dang, I wish I had done better with my 30-year-old. Okay, we're gonna move on there. But I think it's important that we really take self-awareness, responsibility to the max for all of our students, starting in preschool, going to adulthood. Next slide, please. Who? The focus person is crucial. Someone is a facilitator or recorder. I've done a couple more virtual person-driven plans since our last meeting or when we presented on this. You get all the people involved. You get people having a voice. And that's what's really important, to show the young person and his or her family there's a community around everyone. Family members, teachers, coaches, mentors, friends. It just keeps coming back to, we have to have a village. And we build that village to help families, to help that individual, and to help families who are navigating what happens when I die and who's going to take care of my child. Just again, one of those community thinking, investment, and supporting as we move on. Where do we do these meetings? Well, now we do them online through Zoom, etc. In the past, it could be at a house, it could be in a yard, it could be in a park, could be at a Starbucks, could be in a school district, could be at a library. We don't care, as long as everyone is comfortable. And I think that's really important for us educators, trainers, etc. Comfort. Let's not go to the regional center if it's contagious, if it's challenging and there's negative energy. Let's go to a place that's comfortable, positive, looking to the future. How do we do it? A plan could be in any format that is accessible to the focused person. It could be a story, it could be digital, it could be creative drawings, it could be pictures like Donna showed, the child who ran his or her IEP and what that looks like. We do need to have documentation that we will utilize with schools, regional center, adult school, community college, regional center, EDD, etc., mental health clinics. I love when we find out a child is in counseling and we're able to disclose it, to be able to maybe send a video of what the child said were his dreams and his nightmares. So all of this is assuring us we really have the person's voice as we navigate and we move on. Next slide, please. This is what I use as a favorite backbone. It's the MAPS process. What is the story? What is the dream? What are the nightmares? How can we tell what is crucial for that person? What are their needs? What are their next steps? And who was there? And how we're all going to support the next step. Another format, next slide. What are my goals? What are my next steps? What are my outcomes? People who I can invest with to help make it happen. We saw during the presentation, lots of formats. I want you to hear the concept, the words, and the value as we move on. I have a summary slide for now, which is the following. Power of person-centered, person-driven plans. Many times it helps us change the perspective to the individual. No longer hearing mommy and daddy want him to go to college. Mommy and daddy don't ever want him having a job where he gets dirty. Mommy and daddy want him to make more than prevailing wage at any job he goes to. We have to really turn it and listen to the child, the individual, as we navigate. We want to orchestrate high expectations. And that's crucial for all of us. Again, don't take the dreams away. We want to create possibilities, not deficits. Oh my God, your IQ score. Oh my God, you're reading at this level. Oh my God, you're at pre-primer. No, let's talk about what the potential is and how we move from there. The process is real, and it leads to check-ins and commitments of family and community as we build to the future with the highest option, dreaming as much as we can to look to the future. So that's my extra kick on listening to the student, youth, individual, working as a team, working as a village, bringing in our partners. We have just got so many successes by having more partners at the IEP and how powerful that is. So thank you very much. I'm pleased to turn it over to Vicki to talk about self-advocacy empowerment. Thank you, Vicki Shad.
Thank you, Richard. We kind of felt like this poster says it all, self-advocacy. It's the ability to articulate. And like Richard said, it might be pictures, it might be stories, it could be drawings, a lot of different things. There's so much now that we can help people with technology be able to even be more explicit and show their families and the team what they can do, what they need, what they want. So this is just kind of a nice graphic. That next slide, So what is self-advocacy? There's a lot of different definitions, but they all are the same at the core, and they only have a little bit of a fringe difference here or there. But one of them, I think this one to me is the most concise and straightforward, and it's adapted from rights law. And one of the things, learn how to speak up for yourself. That starts at a very young age. Rather than answering for your child, help them to answer. Make your own decisions about your own life. Learn how to get information so that you can understand things that are of interest to you. I heard a young man, 17 yesterday, say, I don't want to do anything that isn't related to contributing to my future, but I don't know what that is. And I think a lot of young adults feel that way, and teenagers. And so how do we help them? Find out who will support you in your journey. Who are the natural supports in your world? Where are your allies? Who are your allies? How do you access them? Knowing your rights and responsibilities. You know, we're often good about telling kids their rights and kids telling us what their rights are going to be at 18. But what about their responsibilities in both sorts? And there's some nice free documents to help with that. Reaching out to others when you need help and friendship, and learning about self-determination. There is a new pathway that we're looking at how piloting on CTE that has to do with, probably some of you are familiar with 211, but some adult services have programs where they have wellness callers, also some other genealogy, and you would be amazed. A lot of the students that we work with have a high level of empathy, and that can be a job that is so important, and they feel so honored to be able to check on people. Say hello, how you doing? Just want to make sure you had somebody to visit with today. Whatever it is. But those things, both the giving and the receiving of that can be very important. Those things need, if their aptitude is there, then there just need skills that are taught to go with it. Okay, next slide, please. Why is it important? You know, and I think that we all believe it's important. There's no special education grocery store, no special education neighborhood to live in when they get to adult. But it's important so they have the knowledge and skills to succeed. They're given a chance to participate in a way that makes sense to them, that they can contribute, and that they then feel like they have some control over their life. Next slide, please. So as educators, you know, the first thing as educators that we need to do is we need to believe ourselves that it's important for them. But it definitely needs to be something we see of value as importance. Then we need to create opportunities for students to practice it and to develop it. Now I have to believe, it was great on the poll at the beginning to see how many have been in multiple webinars, but I have to believe that those two things are already checked off in your box, in your life, in your world, or you wouldn't be participating in these webinars. So then after that, what happens? We create opportunities and we provide supports. Working with the youth. I think on one of my earlier IEPs, when we were talking about student-led IEPs, one of the teachers that was just very committed, still committed to doing student-led IEPs. When people in conferences would ask her, isn't it more work? She would say, no, it's just different work. So working with the youth, being the guide on the side, helping them to identify their needs, teaching them to accommodate for themselves, because part of self-advocacy and part of self-efficacy is when you feel like you can do it yourself and the accomplishment. So whenever possible, teach them how to accommodate for themselves, and then to ask for help, or to ask for help in learning how to accommodate for themselves. Teach them how to ask for help. So much in life is about time and place, isn't it? For all of us, time and place. We'll teach them how to ask, not to blare out in an environment that is not the appropriate time and place, but how and when. Utilize opportunities to develop and practice their skills. And there are so many things within the education world that naturally lend themselves to helping the students have opportunities to create self-advocacy with natural supports and kind of like working with a net so they can develop and practice. Next slide, please. As a parent, key role from the very beginning, build independent skills and encourage your child to do more for themselves. Even with our own grandkids, I find myself sometimes saying to some of the parents, we have 7 and 3 different families, but I sometimes find myself saying, hey, please just let them, I know you think that, but could I just hear what Mark has to say? So Mark could have the answer and talk and to do things himself. I didn't say make them little pack mules, all right? I just said give them the opportunity to do more for themselves. Let them take responsibility and have daily activities at home. Provide opportunities. I know one family with the daily activities, they have multiple children, and every one of their children have one thing they've learned to cook, and that's their thing that they cook. So if they have that for that meal, it's that child gets to have their thing they cooked for everybody. It's kind of neat idea. Provide opportunities for your child to ask questions, to express their needs, and to give opinions to adults. Now, we've heard this in a couple other ways. Some days I think that we're working a little bit on the light side with everybody, adults and kids, on being respectful. So we want them to ask questions, and we want them to ask questions, and we want them to express their views when working with adults, and we want them to be respectful for while they're doing it. Let your child take responsibility for making choices. Now, when we're in education and we get children in our programs, some children have had to make all the decisions without much guidance. Some children have never been able to make a decision. So there's a balance here, and it isn't necessarily just a rationale for adults not to be involved. I can remember when I was in charge of SARB, the School Attendance Review Board, had a parent come in with a little 2nd grader and wasn't sending their child to school. And the parent said, I tell them to put their shoes in the same place every night, but they don't. I'm like, you're the parent, okay? They're the child. So how do you help them take responsibility and make choices and do things, but in a controlled way to begin with, in small increments, step by step, until they can make big choices? Remember Daggett's work about we do things in a controlled environment, like at home with our family, and then we spread out. We might do it to some relatives that don't live with us, so we might interact with them. Then we may spread out to some neighbors, and then maybe we spread out to some place in a mall or a store when all this craziness ends, to learn how to do that. Encourage your child to advocate for themselves in school, in the community, and definitely when they get the opportunity to be in work-based learning. Help your child find out who they will talk to about the issue, and practice what they plan to say. So one of the things you can do as a parent is help them identify who's in their support system. So like if you're not able to be home, or you have to be late to something, which happens, life happens. So how would your child know who to go to next? Or it might be a neighbor, it might be an older sibling. It could be a lot of different things, but help them learn who is involved, who are their supports, and who they can go to when you're not available. Next slide, please. Okay, and youth learn to advocate. They take responsibility for things at school, at home. They learn how to help themselves. They learn how to express their needs and ask for help. We teach them to try to keep their message simple and clear and logical, and that's not always so easy for them. So sometimes that's one that you just have to work through and just keep going until what they're saying makes sense to us. Identify when you need help and what assistance you need. You'd be amazed. If you ask kids, we tend to start asking around 4th to 5th grade what they need. What do you need to be able to do okay in Mr. So-and-so's class. They can almost tell you, especially if you have a list of options, they almost always can tell you what they need, but we don't often ask. Small start and advocate for one thing you need. So, don't let the world become overwhelming. There's so many things and so many dimensions to it, but teach them to look at what is most critical at this point for me to move to my next step, and how can I do that? Practice what you need to say in order to get what you want. Practice in front of the mirror, practice on the telephone, practice under the covers at night before you go to bed. But the more that you practice what you're going to say, the better chance that you're going to get the help you need. Next slide, please. Well, we want to thank, before I turn this over to Sue, we want to thank our SIP partners for facilitating these webinars. We want to thank you for participating in this series, whether you were in one or many or all. And I'm going to do a little commercial here. So the webinars were in no means intended to put any kind of pressure on you to join the California Transition Alliance. But we do have the membership information on the panelists. It's the best $30 a year you'll spend. It helps us do all kinds of networking and capacity building and things. And you're a member of a powerful group that's supporting youth as they transition to adulthood. And with our most recent work, one of our most recent works being really getting that preschool piece moving and starting so much earlier. So if you're interested in being part of our group just as a member, or if you want to take a more active leadership role on the team, we encourage you to go to California Transition Alliance. There's a membership drop down, okay? And take it away, Sue.
Thank you, Vicki. Next slide. One of the things that we are working on that we want to share with you is a project called Let's Work California. We recognize that there is a challenge in terms of how many parents struggle to see their child as somebody who can actually go to work, especially those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we have these individuals throughout the state that we call our competitive integrated employment stars that can encourage peers to go to work and can show examples of people who have achieved. So we worked with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, and we have created this project. And the project elements include actually working with youth to create all the products and all the resources. The second thing we have done is Joey Travolta is in the process right now creating a documentary that showcases 6 competitive and integrated employment stars throughout the state of California. And those young people and their families and the businesses that employ them will be part of this documentary. The other thing we're doing is creating instructional videos, and the instructional videos will talk about how you find employment, how you use your natural support system to develop some skill sets. The videos are by individuals between the ages of 22 to 34. The videos are actually these young people sharing how they do it, and we work with them to accomplish that. The other thing that this project has done is created a YouTube channel. So we encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. Just search Let's Work California in the YouTube search box, and you'll find it, and you can subscribe to the channel. So we're excited about this project, and we've been working on this concurrent with doing the webinars. So our plate is full right now. Okay, moving along, next slide. So let's end on this note. America works best when everybody works, and that's especially true right now. And so we need to find out more about the value and the talent that people bring to the workplace. And we want to leave with knowing for sure that the IEP is a document, transition is a process. And let's agree to provide person-driven quality transition services based on high expectations. Let's help every student to develop a sense of optimism about their future, confidence in themselves, trust that they have adult allies who believe in them and they have the resources they need to achieve their dreams. And this concludes the webinar. We will stay on if you have questions because we do have a little bit of time. But I want to thank each and every one of you for participating, and I want to thank the SIP crew for doing the incredible job they have accomplished with helping us put these things together. We want you to assure you that the resources will continue to be available, and we will work with you anytime, anywhere, any place. So thank you. Any other comments?
I am willing, Donna, after you answer the question about 890 online, I would be willing to share what I learned a few years back when I was still the SELPA director about what these people are telling them about 890. But I'd like you to have the opportunity to answer first.
Okay, am I live right now?
Yes.
Okay, I've never done that before, so sorry. So I just reached out to our, my CalPADS expert who has a direct line to, seems like, to Shiloh up at CDE. The only code that we know that we are not to use, that was not even listed on that form, is code 900. That would be a code, 900 is the code that would be used if somebody suggested that we had to have a student swim with dolphins or something to that effect. If you look at the codes, and I've been looking at them while we've been, while others have been speaking, there is no other code that could be used and comment for life skills. So my comment is to ask your SELPA director perhaps to reach out to other SELPA directors and mentors to find out why she would think 890 is not appropriate. My CalPADS expert said that's an IEP team decision. I mean, that's as far as I know right now, other than if I had the opportunity to do some more research. And I would value Vicky's input or anybody else's input into that.
Thank you, Donna. So yeah, everything you said matches what I know. I have one more little piece of information that I learned a few years ago about 890. Okay, so what was happening were too many places were only putting 890. And as you had mentioned earlier about the need to document, so people were putting 890, but they weren't necessarily describing or documenting what they were doing with 890 very well. So it became a compliance issue.
Mm-hmm.
So several places were marked out of compliance for using 890 because it was too vague and they didn't have any supporting documentation or detail of how they were using 890. So that's how the whole 890 issue came to be a problem, was through reviews where people were, and I'm going to use this word lightly, may have been abusing 890 and having a lack of specificity in terms of what they were doing or using it for. So they may be, the people that are asking the question may be in a district where, or a county or a SELPA, where they heard that, and the people that are guiding them may have been a part of that when that all came to be such a big problem. But the way you used it and described it so clearly and documented it, I don't think anybody could question that in a review.
Well,
that's just my opinion and my experience.
I don't think anybody could question it either, and that is why it's important to document what the service looks like. But I would strongly suggest that, you know, that this individual requests that their SELPA director ask their SELPA group for some clarity and see what other folks are doing. We use it, but we use it with documentation. And as I said, there is a code that you don't see there, and I don't know if maybe the SELPA director is confused and confusing 890 with 900. And I would
actually there might, but there wasn't a specific 890 issue for compliance reviews.
Thank you.
900's been an ongoing issue, but yeah.
Oh, that would be great. Have a fun to join us. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions that need to be responded to? Those people that are doing the chat? I do
Richard,
want
was there one more in chat there that you wanted to respond to?
Well, the only one that I have passion for across the state, please, in all of your districts, SELPAs, et cetera, I am believing that everyone who has a workability project, they know never to write workability into an IEP goal because we are not fully funded across the state. And if you move to XYZ district that doesn't have workability, they have an out of compliance IEP. Instead, talk about the services and support that you're going to provide.
So rockability, somebody put in here workability rocks, and workability
Yes.
does so much. So it doesn't mean in workability or TPP, it doesn't mean that you can't
Right.
put the activities in. You don't name workability, and in some cases TPP, as the responsible party. You name the special education staff or whoever
Doing it by a position, but not by the name of the program for the reasons Richard expressed.
Thank you, Lisa. We agree. Workability Rocks and TPP, the same boat. Thank you, Joyce.
one final note. In the Padlet, there is a document entitled Index of Padlet Resources. And I took the time last night to look through every document that's in there and every resource that's mentioned and cross-referenced it to post-secondary goals and what topics we covered during the course of these webinars. So another tool for you.
Nice.
Okay. Well, thank you all. This concludes the webinar, and we look forward to somehow working together some way with SIP. Thanks.
We will. Thank
Back
you,
to
team.
Kevin.
Thank you, everyone. We're honored to collaborate with your amazing team. The content, the delivery, the organization of it all has been amazing. So we wish everyone out there peace in these times, and we look forward to the next time our paths cross. Take care, everyone.
Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
everyone.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.